Insurers specializing in the legal professional liability sector have experienced considerable growth in policyholder surplus over the past 5 years, but premium levels have remained relatively stagnant during that time frame. That according to a new AM Best report. The Best Market Segment report titled Specialty Legal Professional Liability Insurers Continue to Grow Despite Varied Performance also discusses the many challenges facing law firms, such as more litigious societal environment, third-party litigation financing, and social inflation. One of the authors of this report, Associate Director David Blades, is here with us to explain how these and other issues are coming into play. So David, can you explain just a bit about this composite of insurers that serves as the basis for this analysis?
Sure, John. So when we put this composite together, and it's really focused on insurance companies that are strictly focused on legal professional liability. And basically that's, the insurers who are providing coverage for attorneys and law firms for any potentially costly claims of misrepresentation or mistakes or anything like that in rendering their professional services. So we looked at a group of AM Best rated LPL, if you call it LPL insurers, and we also had the data on a number of non-rated AM Best companies, LPL insurers. So we were able to aggregate both the results of the non-rated and the rated insurers, put together this composite, and then compare it to the overall commercial casualty composite and kind of see what these companies, how they've done from an underwriting performance standpoint, surplus growth, et cetera.
So how has this composite fared over the past decade in terms of premium growth?
So from a premium growth standpoint, and we can look at it on a direct basis, from a direct premium standpoint, year over year, it's been modest, low single digits, 2, 3, 4%. On a net premium basis, and that takes into account the premium that's being ceded to reinsurers, there's been more variability in terms of how the composite is grown in terms of net premiums written. There have been years where, in the last several, where the year-over-year growth has been, higher single digits, 7, 8, 9%, but there have also been years where the premium has gone down. So again, a lot of that has to do with the reinsurance strategy of these companies. But as you mentioned, in terms of growing their policyholder surplus, the composite has done well in terms of growing that, and we've seen that kind of growth be considerable for these companies.
So how does this legal professional liability composite compare with the larger commercial casualty composite?
So the legal professional liability composite, the LPL composite, is a subset of the overall commercial casualty composite, but that commercial casualty composite includes those companies that are much bigger companies that are writing GL and writing workers' comp, other casualty lines. But the smaller the LPL insurers, that composite, in general, they've produced results in many years. If we look at the key combined ratio measure, for example, compared to the commercial casualty composite, there have been several years over the last 10 where they've been better than the commercial casualty composite, but due to different variances from year to year, like for example, 2022, when court closures and court delays impacted the LPL composite, that impacted their underwriting expenses because, again, with those delays, they caused cases to be open longer, so the loss adjustment expenses for the LPL insurers elevated in those years. So that was one particular year where we saw a greater variance in the results. So whereas the commercial casualty composite has been very consistent, the LPL composite has been better than the commercial casualty composite in many years, but there've been a few years where, for different reasons, their combined ratio is elevated. There was one other year where one of the larger LPL insurers had extraordinary unfavorable loss reserve development that hurt their results, and that actually elevated the combined ratio for the composite in the aggregate. So we've seen some of that. Also, it impacts the composite when you compare it to the commercial casualty composite, that policyholder dividends that are paid out, because these are smaller insurers, and we look at the combined ratio after policyholder dividends, sometimes the annual policyholder dividends that are paid out by these companies impact their combined ratio to a greater degree than the commercial casualty composite. And so we'll see in those years the combined ratio for the LPL composite be elevated compared to the commercial casualty composite. But overall, from an operating ratio standpoint, 8 of the last 10 years, the LPL composite has had a ratio that's been lower or better than that of the commercial casualty composite. So it's performed well, but like I said, much greater variability, and that's part and parcel to the fact that these are smaller insurers. So any one extraordinary event might impact their results more so than the average commercial casualty composite company.
So David, what's happening with litigation trends?
So I think the main thing is you think about social inflation and how it's impacting a number of different lines of business. It's definitely impactful for LPL insurers. What we've seen is claim severity is where it has the main impact, and we've seen that on jury awards, but also on settlements. You've seen average settlements increasing, and obviously the whole nuclear verdict thing where you see verdicts over 10 million. We've seen that having an impact, and especially since we're talking about a lot of these companies being some of the smaller companies, they definitely have to watch out for the impact that kind of cases that they're, the kind of attorneys that they're insuring, and the fact that social inflation can have, a big problem from that perspective. Just staying out of, going to jury trials is not even, a way of combating this trend, because again, from a claims settlement standpoint, a lot of the settlements have elevated. Average settlements have been elevated the last several years. And then we've also seen, again, litigation funding where third parties are coming in and taking on the legal case, and that's had an impact in terms of claim severity as well. And it's also impacted these insurers from the standpoint of when third parties get involved, in a lot of cases, the length of time that these cases stay open expands, and that just means more expenses that are paid out from a legal perspective. And so it impacts these LPL insurers from an expense standpoint outside of the actual indemnification that comes from the judgment or the settlement. So those trends have been very impactful, especially, like I said, for these smaller companies, and it's something that we continue to look at in terms of the health of the LPL composite. But as I mentioned earlier, in general, from a combined ratio standpoint and from an overall underwriting ratio standpoint, they've been doing fairly well, although there's been variability from year to year.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, John.
That was David Blades, Associate Director, Industry Research and Analytics. You can find the full report online at ambest.com. For AM Best TV, I'm John Weber.